You had a pretty good childhood, right? That's what you tell everyone, including yourself. Nothing bad really happened, or at least that's how you remember it. No abuse, no yelling, no neglect. Your parents did their part, fed you, clothed you, and kept you safe. By most standards, you had it good. So why do you feel like something's missing? Not something small, something foundational. Like there's a hollow space inside you that's been there so long you thought it was just part of your personality. A quiet emptiness you can't explain because nothing traumatic caused it. You compare yourself to people with real trauma and feel guilty. Because what right do you have to feel this way? Nothing happened to you. You weren't abandoned. You weren't abused. You had everything you needed, except you didn't. Because somewhere, between having your physical needs met and actually being seen, something got lost. And because it wasn't dramatic, because it didn't announce itself with violence or chaos, you never noticed it was gone, until now. Let's talk about what this actually feels like, because emotional neglect doesn't look like neglect. It looks normal. It looks like a functional family. It looks fine from the outside. You were a good kid, easy, low maintenance. You didn't ask for much, and somewhere along the way, that became your role. The child who didn't need anything. The one who figured it out on their own. The one who was so mature for their age, and everyone praised you for it. What a good kid, so independent, so capable, no problems at all. But here's what they didn't see. You weren't mature. You were adapting. You learned early that your emotional needs made people uncomfortable. Not angry, just uncomfortable. So you stopped having them, or at least you stopped showing them. You learned to self-soothe before you even knew what that meant. You learned to be okay alone. You learned that feelings were something you handled privately, quietly, without bothering anyone. And it worked. You survived. You grew up. You turned out fine. Except for this feeling, this persistent sense that something's off, that you're going through the motions of connection, but never quite reaching it, that you're always slightly outside of your own life, watching it happen instead of living it. Here's what nobody tells you about emotional neglect. It's not what happened to you. It's what didn't happen. It's the absence of something so fundamental that you don't even have language for what's missing. You weren't abused, but you also weren't truly seen. Your parents cared for you, but they didn't know you. They provided, but they didn't attune. They were there, but they weren't present. And because nothing bad happened, you have nothing to point to. No story that explains why intimacy feels dangerous. No reason you should struggle to identify your own emotions. No excuse for why you feel so disconnected from yourself. And here's what this looks like now. You're the friend everyone relies on, but you never reach out when you're struggling. You're in relationships, but you can't fully let anyone in. You do everything right. You show up. You perform. But you're exhausted because you're still running the same program. Be easy. Don't need too much. Handle it yourself. So you learn to minimize it. I had a good childhood. My parents did their best. Other people had it worse. And all of that is true. And none of it changes the fact that something essential was missing. The wound isn't in what they did. It's in what they couldn't give. And that wound lives in you now as a quiet belief that your inner world doesn't matter. That your feelings are too much or not worth mentioning. That the real you is something to be managed, not expressed. This is why you struggle to ask for what you need. Why you default to, I'm fine, even when you're not. Why vulnerability feels like weakness. Why you can give endlessly but receiving feels uncomfortable, almost shameful. Because you learned early that your needs were inconvenient. Not through cruelty, through absence, through being rushed when you needed to be heard, through being told you're okay when you weren't, through having your feelings minimized, redirected, or met with awkward silence. So you grew up emotionally self-sufficient, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. And now, as an adult, that self-sufficiency has become a prison. You're alone even when you're with people. You're guarded even when it's safe. You're performing even when no one's asking you to, because somewhere deep inside, you still believe that the real you, the messy, needy, emotional you, is too much for anyone to handle. You don't say that out loud, but you live like it. Nothing bad happened, and that's why this wound was never noticed. And the cruelest part, you don't even realize you're doing it, because this is just how you've always been. This is your baseline. Some people grew up knowing their emotions mattered, that when they were sad, someone held space for that sadness, that when they were scared, someone made them feel safe, not by fixing it, just by being present for it. You didn't get that, not because your parents were monsters, but because they were overwhelmed, or emotionally unavailable themselves, or because they confused providing with parenting. And none of that is your fault, but it became your burden. Because when a child's emotional world is consistently dismissed or unacknowledged, they don't learn that they're being neglected. They learn that their emotions are the problem. So they stop trusting them. They stop expressing them. They stop even knowing what they feel. And that disconnection from yourself, that's the wound. The one you carry but never named. The one that doesn't fit any story of trauma but shapes everything about how you relate to yourself and others. And here's the part that might break you open. You're still that child. The one who learned too early that their needs were inconvenient. The one who got praised for not crying, for not asking, for being so easy. They're still inside you, waiting. Not for someone to fix them, but for someone to finally see them. And that someone has to be you. Because no one else knows this wound exists. They see the functional adult, the capable person who has it together. They don't see the child underneath who's been emotionally alone their entire life. Your parents probably loved you the best way they knew how. But love without connection is like food that just fills you up without truly nourishing you, and you've been starving your whole life without realizing why. This is the wound you never noticed. Not because it was small, but because it was everywhere. So constant that it became your normal. So invisible that you thought it was just who you are. You deserved to be seen, not just looked at. Seen. You deserved to have your feelings acknowledged, not fixed or minimized. You deserved to be asked what was wrong and to have someone wait for the real answer, not just accept, I'm fine. You absolutely deserve to take up space, to need things, and to be messy, emotional, and uncertain. That's totally okay. You didn't get that, huh? So, you learned to live without it, and made yourself smaller in the process. You got comfortable with not being fully understood, and that adaptation, that survival strategy, it's still running. Every time you say, I'm fine, when you're not. Every time you minimize your pain. Every time you pull away when you actually need to move closer. You're still that child trying to be easy, still trying to prove you don't need too much, still trying to earn the right to take up space. But here's what that child needs to hear. You're allowed to need things. You're allowed to not be okay. You're allowed to be too much for some people, because the right people will never make you feel like you are. Your emotions aren't inconvenient. They're information. Your needs aren't weaknesses. They're requirements. Your inner world isn't something to manage. It's something to inhabit. And the emptiness you feel, that's not because something's wrong with you. It's because something was missing, something you needed but never received, something you've spent your whole life trying to not need. But you can't not need connection. You can't not need to be seen. You can't not need to matter. These are human requirements, not optional extras. And when they're missing in childhood, when you grow up emotionally alone even in a full house, it doesn't just go away. It stays with you as this quiet ache. This sense that something's fundamentally off, even when everything looks fine. That ache is real. It's valid. And it doesn't need a dramatic story to justify its existence. Nothing bad happened, but nothing deeply good happened either. And that absence shaped you just as much as any trauma would have. And that person, they've been waiting for you this whole time.